Good friend Danny Kanell back talking some college ball, and we'll go through all of the conferences, talk about the quarterbacks that you need to know about, and do a little draft of teams that we think can make the expanded playoff. It is my good friend, former co-host Danny Kanell from back in the day. What's up, man? Good to see you.
Good to see you too, man. It's been a minute. You looking great. Love the backdrop. Looks good. You look well rested. I mean, you look skinny. You look great, man.
I look skinny? That's not a compliment.
Look good. Oh, that is not a compliment. That's right. I mean, I didn't know. Man. You're not in the you're not the target demo for Ozempic. So I know it's popular out there in your neck of the woods, but I don't see you.
It is popular out here, yeah. No, yeah. I don't to me that'd be just a sentence of back to high school phase of me. So people would have thought good. I was on it in high school. No, I appreciate it. This is super complimentary to start the podcast here. Okay. So normally most years we'd probably start this going, okay, give me your 4 playoff teams. Give me the 6 or 7 we think could be in it. Is there kind of a surprise? And when I was mapping out how I wanted to do this, like I don't want to do who are your 12. I've already talked about my issues with expansion, but I do know that it adds a different element to it. It's going to change the conversations about a lot of different stuff. So do you think there are locks? Maybe the locks are the teams that we would think are the 4. So when you look at like the top teams, I think that's kind of how we start. Like, give me who you love, and then maybe we'll get into some of the rankings. You're like, I don't see it at all.
I love Georgia to make the playoff. I don't know if I'm going to pick them to win it all. I saw a stat from David Hale at ESPN that Georgia, I don't know if you saw this, has not lost to a coach other than Nick Saban in the regular season since November 7th, 2020. An active FBS coach since January 1st, 2019, which was Tom Herman when he was at Texas. And Kirby Smart hasn't lost to an active FBS coach in an SEC game since November 17th of 2017. Their dominance in the regular season is absolutely out of control. Carson Beck, I feel really good, like trusting him. I think he's got to take another step to kind of showcase where he's projected number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft. But as far as what he's done at Georgia, and here's the other reason I think they're a lock to get to the playoffs. They could be 10-2, and they're a lock to get in. And that could be a situation which could unfold with road games at Bama and at Texas. And even if they slipped, had one other slip up, and again, all of these are kind of outrageous to even suggest that they could lose these games based on the stat I gave you, but they're gonna get in. Like they're in the playoff no matter what. That's why, the expansion, I think some people might have thought, oh, this is great for the group of 5. They're gonna get a team in, or this is great for Penn State, because they've always been on the outside looking in. While it is good for those teams, I think it's better for Georgia because sometimes half the battle last year was a great example. You don't get in because there's only 4 teams. Now you're probably going to get in almost every year. And the chances of a team beating you in that scenario is pretty slim. So I think it really favors some of the heavyweights more so than most. Sure, we might see upsets, but I think it really benefits a team like Georgia. So I'm a believer that Georgia is going to be in the playoff. Do they win it? I don't know. But I feel like they are a lock. And I would say the same for Ohio State. I'd say the same that's probably the only 2 that I feel like locks to get in. Although, I would say the top 3 teams in the Big Ten are locks to get in. Like I feel really good about Penn State getting in. I feel really good about Oregon getting in. My lock field is expanding kind of as we're going through it.
Yeah, Georgia, and if you want to make the argument against it somehow happening, you would say, well, if you look at their SEC schedule, they're playing the number 4, the number 5, and the number 6 preseason teams on the road in the regular season conference schedule. So they're going to be at Bama, they're going to be at Texas, and then there'll be a break in there, but after Florida, before Florida, and then they're at Ole Miss. So in normal, now granted, this is part of the expansion thing of like, how did you get this many teams in there? And then you start with Clemson, who's probably the co-favorite with Florida State in the ACC. But I really like your point in that it certainly expands the field, but now you can screw up. You might be able to screw up twice. With that kind of resume, and if they smoke everybody the way they do. And when I go through all the quarterback stuff, it's tougher now, I think, than ever before, because almost every guy's stats are really good, and you can talk yourself back into something if you haven't watched a lot of the games. But I really feel like Beck is on a short list of guys that I go, I would be shocked if he's not really impressive this year, because I just thought as the season progressed, and I know there's the Bama game there, but as the season progressed, he just felt like somebody going, this guy's coming back next year. I feel really good about him.
One of the teams that I'm not, a lot of people are high on, Ole Miss. Schedule sets up perfectly for them because you mentioned they do get Georgia at home. They do dodge Alabama. They get Oklahoma at home. The non-conference, I know it's tough going against an ACC foe and Wake Forest on the road, but I'll give that to them. Just
3:30 kick.
Yeah, that's a tough environment they could have to go to. But if you look at how they've fared, and Lane has done a great job, and this is not a knock against Lane, and this is one of the reasons I think is because the schedule sets up is why they went all in and brought in Walter Nolan from Ole Miss, brought in Princely U from Florida, and brought in a lot of these pieces, and once again went after it, is because they feel like this is their time. But the one thing Lane Kiffin hasn't done that even Hugh Freeze was able to do before him, he hasn't fared well against Bama or Georgia or the big dogs in that conference. So I need to see him take a step forward in that area. Until I see it, I'm a little bit skeptical on Ole Miss being this team that could be a true national championship contender. The schedule does set up very favorably for them. But even the LSU game, I'm not chalking that up as a win just yet for them. Even Oklahoma at home, not chalking that up as a dub just yet. But so I guess I'm a little bit more cautious on the hype around Ole Miss than most people are. Because what are they, 5 or 6 in the preseason top 25? I think they're a little bit overhyped right now.
Yeah. Okay. A lot of it has to do with Jackson Dart, because I think he's that good. The offense is going to be really good. That's not a question whatsoever. And look, they put up a million yards of offense against LSU in that game, but LSU's defense was just a disaster last year. So even with LSU having Nussmeier and there's still enough receivers there, they're going to figure out the O-line will be better. That secondary was so bad last year that I would have to, I'm going to have to see it. We'll see how it looks against SC and everything to start the season before I'm going to start thinking that a win at LSU for Ole Miss is a real national championship boosting thing. But I don't even know what the resume stuff will mean. I don't think the resume stuff is going to mean as much for Georgia or in Ohio State, because we're not going to be having the same kind of arguments. We're going to be talking about Penn State's resume. We're going to be talking about maybe an LSU's resume. And I know Penn State fans are probably sick of me and hate me for this, but when I look at it in the last 2 regular seasons, they don't beat anybody. They beat Utah in the bowl game 2 years ago. They shut out Iowa, but I don't know what an Iowa win means. They lose to Ohio State, Michigan, back-to-back years. They lost the bowl game this year, but that's 6 top 12 finishes for Penn State under Franklin, which is kind of cool. But I would say the same thing about LSU. LSU last year, they lost to Bama. They lost the Ole Miss game. They lost to Florida State in week 1. They went 1-3 against ranked teams. And now that caliber of team is going to be in the conversation to play for a national championship. And so whether it's LSU's defense last year and that resume, or Penn State not beating the other teams that have athletes that can match theirs when they're just going to overwhelm the rest of a Big Ten, that's not obviously the same product this year. That's always going to be something that I look at and go, okay, cool. We're going to be arguing like crazy about this stuff in November, and they may not be anything.
I think I think the 12 team really benefits Penn State from a perception. I think it clearly helps James Franklin, who, every question I get, I'm sure you do too, anytime on social media or wherever, what do we have to do to what do we have to do to take that next step? They might not take the next step, but they will be perceived as taking the next step because they'll probably get into the playoff. But I do think the opportunity to get there, they've got to win one of these close games sooner or later. So even if they win a playoff game, I don't think they're a legitimate national championship contender unless Drew Aller takes a massive step forward. And by the way, I do really like the hire of Andy Koltnicki coming in from Kansas. But the quarterbacks he was working with were slightly different build than what Drew Aller is. Drew Aller's a big kid, but he's not exactly Jalen Daniels or Jason Bean, who are running a lot. But I do think he's got some innovative ideas. I know they brought in a receiver from Ohio State. That's, at least gives him a pretty good target to throw to, because that was one thing I noticed. I mean, the defense I kind of trust, right? They bring in Tom Allen from Indiana to replace Manny Diaz. They've always had ballers on defense. To me, it is about the offense. Can the offense take that next step? But is Drew Aller, because you look at the stat line, I think it was 26 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, but it's a little bit misleading. It was a little bit of check down city. And watching him play, I was in Columbus for the Penn State Ohio State game, and he just looked a little bit overwhelmed. But I also noticed that there weren't a lot of receivers running open. I think that's been an issue for them. So I'm curious to see, with receivers that are good, maybe not great, can Colton Leakey scheme up some things to get some guys running open? Julian Fleming was the receiver from Ohio State that I was thinking about. So at least he's got somebody who was recruited out of high school, maybe just was in a really crowded room that's still uber talented, that he could throw to. But if they can take that step forward, they've been in close games with Ohio State and Michigan. Sure, maybe they lose them again, but can they get there and then maybe playing a team from the Big 12 that they can win in a playoff game? They'll probably be in the conversation for a home playoff game, which will be insane to see Happy Valley in that place. And then let's see an ACC or Big 12 or even an SEC team potentially have to travel in there in late December when it's cold. So I'm excited for that type of opportunity, more so than I'm as Penn State, can they really win the title? I'm excited for the energy and enthusiasm it could bring. And then, what that brings, it helps you recruit a little bit stronger, which will help Penn State make a little bit of inroads closer to Ohio State and Michigan and Oregon, by the way.
The Aller numbers, I used to love when I would see somebody with low interceptions, and then I don't know how many years ago where I started thinking about it. Maybe it was a Kirk Cousins moment I was having where I just went, I might want to see around 8 or 9 interceptions, because that tells me that you're making some of these throws. And I don't care what the touchdown interception split for Aller is, because we all saw it. And whether it was 70 yards against Michigan or 18 to 42 against Ohio State, you just weren't it didn't feel good. And it's a transfer rule that I remember thinking of last year's, because I think their number 2 guy ended up being from Kent State. So that told you that the in-house options. So maybe it's the guys not getting open, not getting separation. Maybe it's the new offense, because no one's ever brought in a new offensive coordinator and then downgraded their expectations. But Aller should just find you some wins in those big moments where, hey, everything's going to be really hard on this third down because you're going up against Ohio State, you're going up against Michigan. You have to find a way to make one of these plays. And that just wasn't there for him in those 2 biggest games. I can't believe that we've done this much on Penn State already, but I think they're actually the perfect example of the team. You're right. Perception is, okay, now we're in the playoff. It's maybe nothing actually changed. But when you look at the schedule, they don't have Michigan this year. They've got Ohio State at home. They've got to go out to SC after the game with UCLA, and then they're going to have Washington at home, which I have no idea what to make of Washington at all. None. I have no idea if it's going to be really good or why do we think this is still.
I think Washington's going to be similar to what happened to TCU after the championship game. And I know at least Washington was slightly more competitive against Michigan. They have 3 returning players from the 2 deep. Not from the starters, not 3 starters return. It's from the 2 deep. They have nobody back. And I like Jed Fish a lot. I think he's a program rebuild guy. He did a phenomenal job at Arizona. I would have liked them a lot more. Could he have brought Fafita from Arizona and Tedderota McMillan, who's an incredible wide receiver? He didn't. Will Rogers, I think, brings you some stability, but I think this is clearly a rebuild year for Washington. So I like Penn State in that game.
Okay, so let's look at some of these other quarterbacks, and we'll stay in the Big Ten because of the Will Howard part of this with Ohio State. We know that Ohio State's loaded up, as always, and even more so in the portal with Caleb Downs leaving Alabama. That's going to sting for Bama fans. I don't care how well Kalen DeBoer has done in recruiting. He's done a great job, but Downs was just that special as a freshman. First freshman to lead Bama in tackles since 1970. But the hope is that you're bringing in Howard, who, if you want to do a numbers to numbers thing again here, which is kind of a good segue off of Aller, is that you can look at some Kyle McCord stuff and go, well, what was the problem with him? He was 24-6 split, completed 66% of his passes, throws for 3,000 plus yards. You saw those limitations, though, in some of those biggest moments. And I think at least with Howard, it's about the dual threat with him and the fact that you can tell me if I'm wrong here, but Howard feels like more of a baller, like a guy that's just going to go out there and ball in a way that other guys aren't seeing the game at that position.
I totally agree. I think he's a perfect fit. By the way, Chip Kelly going to Ohio State, I think was one of the best offseason moves, like any head coaching or coordinator hire. I think it's really going to work well, especially because I don't think there's any sort of intimidation factor from Ryan Day, like worried he's going to try to take his job. I think it's his mentor, right? That's where he learned everything. There's video of him playing at New Hampshire, quarterback for him. This is his old coach, but I think Chip is like reinvigorated as well. Like he's got like this breath of fresh air with not having to worry about recruiting and going on the road. He can just worry about the offense. And Will Howard, I do think, is the style of play, being athletic. He can run. I think that's going to be what is going to surprise people, is how much more physical Ohio State's going to be on the offensive side of the ball. Like, I don't think this is going to be a CJ Stroud type of offense or even a Justin Fields. I think Will Howard's going to be a runner. I think you're going to see Travion and Quinshon Judkins in the backfield at the same time. I think there's going to be a lot of misdirection. I think it's going to be like, good luck stopping us. We're coming downhill. And I also think it limits Will Howard's exposure somewhat in the pass game, where he's not going to be relied on to throw for 4,000 yards. You're not going to need it. And I think he's going to be a much more consistent thrower. But to your point, like, I totally agree with you, because there's something about a check down Charlie where, like, you're asking that quarterback, come on, man, like, take a shot or two here or there, which I think is harder to teach and get a quarterback's mindset to change. Whereas if you get a gunslinger, somebody's a little bit more like a baller, like you described him, like, we're going to be good. There's going to be opportunities to make those plays. We just need to manage that risk a little bit better. I would rather have that style of quarterback every time. And I do think that's what Will Howard brings to the table. He also, I saw, I think it was Chip said the other day that he ran like 22 miles per hour, was the fastest player on the team in their offseason workouts. Like, he is a runner and he's big. He's like 240. They're going to be physical, which has been their biggest criticism. And I'm sure Ryan Day and every Ohio State fan has watched the way Michigan has run the Big Ten. And it was big criticism that Ryan Day had after they beat Notre Dame. He probably should have waited till after the season to start, pumping his chest about how physical they are. But I do think Ohio State's going to be way more physical this season.
I do wonder with some of the quarterbacks too, like where I'll watch, and you don't know, you'll have theories that pop in your head, but offenses have done such a great job of creating these advantages.
Yes.
And if you think of the way a kid now goes through the high school ranks, the camps, and I'm not turning this into like an AAU for football thing, but I wonder if everything is so programmed with some of these top talents that then when it becomes that freelance part of it, and needing somebody to kind of just like play with a little less fear, I wonder if that's something that that's happening, that we're seeing now with some of these younger quarterbacks, where it's like, as soon as I'm off schedule now, I'm totally lost, despite being one of the top overall recruits and putting up all these ridiculous numbers and having all of these physical gifts. Because in some of these offenses be like, okay, this is the read. It's this read, and then it's this read, and then we're done. Like, don't even think about looking at the other side of the field, or you're not even going to get to your third option, or you're not going to have, or we're always going to have an advantage on this route. Because again, with Ohio State, their teams were always just so much better than the majority of everybody they're going to play, other than Michigan. So I wonder if that's part. And like, look, with Howard, I'm not going to worry about that with him at all. I just wonder if that's the case with some of these other guys that come in with huge profiles, but actually can't think the game in a way that you need them to.
Offense always has had the advantage. I mean, that's been the case for the last 20 years, and probably even more so since the implementation of the RPO, and how it's just everything favors the offense. But the offensive minds and the innovation that have come in there, like exactly what you're talking about, a lot of these quarterbacks, they don't have to get through their first option because the first option is wide open. Like the offensive minds and the way they've scouted, and they start getting things and they dial up shot plays. Like, I remember getting shot plays called up where we were going to take a shot, and it was like, we hope this post comes wide open. and it would hit maybe 40% of the time, or else you'd have to get your check down. But now it feels like the shot plays, the chunk plays, they're scheming guys wide open all the time. And kind of going back to the Will Howard, last year we're talking about Drew Aller, Kyle McCord. Again, saw those two players in person. The difference in that game was Marvin Harrison Jr. was schemed open a couple. Now he's incredible. You don't have to scheme him open, but he got open a couple wide open times. Kyle McCord hit him like first read, and they ended up winning the game because of a couple big plays to Marvin Harrison Jr. Like, that's what you're talking about. The one thing that has me a little bit concerned, have you seen what, and this is the case for two schools, where Chris Kleiman, the head coach of Kansas State, he's alluded to the fact that if Will Howard would have come back, he wouldn't have beat out Avery Johnson, which is interesting. Like, why didn't you want to bring him back? And then there's also this fact, maybe he doesn't want to admit that they got outbid. There's also that. But he did.
You also could just be talking up your guy that's in-house too.
Exactly.
And,
exactly.
He might be telling the truth, but I've also heard every coach spin everything to their advantage at some point anyway. So I don't know what to make. Like, I've started reading less previews because I just can't do it anymore.
But I go back to last
all of
season,
these previews. Go ahead.
There was a stretch last year at Kansas State where Will Howard, I remember doing this, like he almost got benched. Now, almost is relative. He got hurt. Avery Johnson came in, kind of lit it up. And then Kleiman was like, we're going to split series this game. And then, like, he never played, like, he didn't play any more meaningful snaps. So Will Howard kind of put it to bed, like, pretty quickly. But I did think that was interesting that they were that bullish on Avery Johnson. But as Ohio State fans pointed out, like, Joe Burrow was at Ohio State and wasn't playing. And, and then it worked out pretty well for LSU. Like, you could, one man's trash might be another one's treasure. And I think Will Howard is going to be helped tremendously with the talent that he's around and the system that he's in.
Okay, there's more things that I want to get to here, so I feel like I got us bogged down in it, but I do have to do something on Michigan. We know the news recently. Harbaugh gets a show cause and more, I guess, administrative bad news for Michigan, but it just may not mean anything. I don't think the kids are going to care, and really it comes down to, I guess, is Alex Orji going to be the guy at quarterback? He's thrown. We know what he is. When he gets out on the field, it's immediately physically impressive. He's thrown one pass in his career. Michigan still has a lot of guys back on defense that I really like, and they've recruited well enough that they're still in the mix here. But that's asking a lot of Orji, who looks like he's just somebody that has only been brought in to the run game because he's so physically gifted.
You know what it reminds me a lot of? Like, eerily similar, is Jalen Milroe. And now Milroe had I think it was the Mississippi State game he played, and he had 3 touchdown passes. Like, we saw more of him as a passer. But I remember their bowl game when Bryce Young's last game, I think they played Kansas State, and they won. There was a report out that Jalen Milroe was taking reps at wide receiver. Like, that's how they were considering a change of position for Jalen Milroe. It was very much up in the air. Remember, after the spring, he struggled. And they brought in Buckner from Notre Dame. Like, there was all this thing, like, who's the guy going to be? It can't be Jalen Milroe. He's just a runner. And then even early in the season, which I do think could play out very similarly with Michigan, it was like, remember they played South Florida and he started Buckner and gave the other kid time and didn't play Milroe at all. And then Saban like folded and was like, no, we're going to go back to Milroe and just ride it out with him. And he slowly like started to develop. I think that's what you could see with Milroe. The one thing that I think
with Orji, you mean?
I mean, yeah, with Orji. But I think they're like very, very similar situations. I think what helps Orji even more is like, JJ McCarthy, as good as he was, and we'll see how he does in the NFL. They did not rely on him to do very much. I think he had in his whole career, I think he had 3 games over 300 yards. Like, Alex Orji's not going to be asked to, pick apart defenses and sit from shotgun. He's going to be asked to hand it off to Donovan Edwards, probably to run it more than J.J. McCarthy had to run it. And they're still going to try to run over teams. I mean, and I think the one thing Sharon Moore brings to the table with the offensive lineman mentality, offensive line coach mentality, he's even more of a willingness to run the football. I mean, the second half of the Penn State game is a great example. Harbaugh wasn't there. I know J.J. McCarthy was dinged up. They're like, we are not going to throw the ball. I think that's one thing that favors Orji while he's kind of figuring it out. But where it kind of holds them back, J.J. McCarthy in the clutch games, in the toughest games of the season, did come up and he showed the ability to make big plays on third downs, red zone, playoff against Bama, and he's even making catches. but he would convert in the crucial situations. That's what we don't know about Orji, which again, going back to the Milroe comparison, I think it could be a little bit bumpy early, and there's going to be a lot of scrutiny on him. Oh, do we go to the guy that lit it up in the spring game? Because that was the story was Davis Warren. Who the heck is this guy? And he had 3 touchdown passes. I think they're going to roll with Orji and just limit his exposure and really feature him as a runner.
Okay, let's talk Bama then. Good job on Milroe, because he has numbers in every direction. His sack numbers, the number of sacks that happen when he's pressured, they're the worst in college football. All right. It's not last place, but I think one number's third worst. I think percentage of pressures that lead to a sack was the second worst of any of the quarterbacks. The deep ball numbers are terrific. The rushing numbers are terrific. The intermediate stuff is bad. I don't think he's that good. Okay. And Saban getting to the playoff with him and kind of not knowing what you're getting every week offensively, I think is probably one of Saban's best coaching jobs, and maybe was the final straw for him to be I don't know if I can do that again. But to be fair, the same way Jaden Daniels, I thought he was all right 2 years ago, and then he wins the Heisman. And I think that 2-year turnaround is one of the most impressive things I've seen at that position. Okay. But maybe this is just the next step for Milroe, but I'm telling you, if it's the same thing, if it's the up play, the down play, the up play, the down play, I thought he was all over the place against Michigan. I don't know if Bama can get back to the playoff if that's the kind of season they get from their quarterback again. And I know a lot of people are going to listen to this and think I'm nuts and that he got a lot better. I saw a guy in the deep ball numbers that threw it up Jermaine Burton, and Burton made the play. And it was just please make this happen. He's a terrific runner, but there's just a lot of holes. And maybe they're gone now. And maybe he's going to be better, and it's going to be his job, and he doesn't have to deal with all the bullshit that he was doing in the past. But I think it's a miracle that team was in the playoff with the quarterback play they got from him last year.
I agree. I thought the offense, I think I said this with you last year. It was almost like the new NBA where you just, the 3-point shot has become so prevalent. It's the percentages. Well, if you hit the threes, you don't have to hit as many. They were taking deep shots. Well, we don't have to complete 70% of our passes. Let's just hit, 30% of our deep balls, which is where Jalen Milroe really excelled. And he was able to hit on those enough to get him back there. I'm very much on the same page with Milroe. I'm not a believer in him as this. I've seen some projections for the NFL draft. He's got to take a massive step forward as a processor of information, as a decision maker in the pocket. Now, I do think the one advantage he has is Kalen DeBoer has done a really good job throughout his career, wherever he's been, working with quarterbacks and mobile quarterbacks. I still think you're going to see Jalen Milroe running the football a lot.
You should. He's great at it.
Yeah.
Right?
One of the things about Penix that really impressed me was Washington's offensive line got a ton of credit last year for, I think they only gave up 12 sacks the entire season. A lot of that was not the offense. The offensive line clearly was good, but Penix's knowledge of where to go with the football quick, where to redirect traffic, that I really like. I don't want to say he's going to unseat my guy Kirk Cousins, but I think he's going to play a long time in the NFL because he was very smart at the line of scrimmage. And you could see these little intricacies of where he just knowledge of the system. And we haven't seen that from Jalen Milroe. And if Kalen DeBoer can bring that in and help him in that area, then maybe he turns into that style of quarterback and he can grasp some of these concepts. But from what we've seen, I'm not buying it either. I'm very skeptical. He's way too erratic. Penix is a very natural throw of the football. His release, ball's a cannon. He puts in a tight windows. Milroe struggles with those mid-range, accuracy. And so I don't know if you can teach that up, just being an accurate thrower. A lot of that's innate, natural talent. And I've seen more of a mechanical, erratic thrower of the football.
Is there anyone else in the SEC that you like or hate?
What do you think of Nussmeier? Because there's a lot of...
I like him.
Yeah, most people do. I'm more tentative on Nuss than I think most people are. Just from the standpoint of, I'm always a little bit cautious with players that we've only seen a little glimpse of, and they've been good, but How is it going to translate over the course of a year when you are under scrutiny like you've never seen before? By the way, I know Jaden Daniels is gone, but there's also 2 incredible wide receivers that are gone as well. And this is wide receiver I get it. And Kyron Lacey's supposed to be a stud, but I think they're going to have to rely on the run game a little bit more. And then most importantly, like, what do you do when, like, I don't think they're going to lose to USC. They might. It could be a shootout. It could be a wild game. But if you lose, like, how do you do under the scrutiny of being the starting quarterback? I think he'll be able to handle it. But there's always that, like, do you get gun shy? Does it change your outcome? I'm just a little bit more skeptical of he's going to step in and LSU is going to be the exact same offensively. I think it could be a little bit of a bumpy ride for them on the offensive side of the ball. Offensive line looks great, so that should be in his favor. But great offensive line in the SEC are still going to get hit a lot. So I'm curious to see, and he's not as mobile as Jaden Daniels, who ran around a lot for LSU. I think that offense is going to take a step back.
Well, I would imagine it's going to, because Jaden was just that good. I mean, he basically played the position perfectly, and I have to see what the defense looks like against SC. I don't have like a lot of, well, they're going to be, there's no way it can be as bad because it was really that, like, they couldn't stop anybody when they needed to stop it. It wasn't going to happen for them, and it didn't matter. And unfortunately, it's kind of like a waste of just an epic offensive season. And on top of, Lacey coming back at wide receiver, but to have Neighbors and Thomas as first round wide receivers, and, you're not at least sniffing it. But we've already covered them.
You know who I'm cautious on? And I would say borderline, like, don't like the hype around them. Notre Dame checking in at their 7th in the preseason in the coaches poll. Riley Leonard coming off an injury, going to a new system where they just lost their left tackle after losing Joe Alt. So, like, Joe Alt goes to the Chargers. This young kid, I forget his name. I can look it up, but he gets lost for the season with an ACL. Yeah. So now they're bumping in another guy, and they have to go to Texas A&M week 1. They've got Florida State. Essentially, it's a 2, maybe 3 game schedule. So, like, I think that's what people are projecting, because they should be able to, like, 10-2 looks very doable, if not almost guaranteed. But I think they have zero chance of winning the national championship. They're going to be in. Riley Leonard is, and I love him. He's a really good kid. He had 3 passing touchdowns last year. 3. Like, in the way he's talked about, the year before, I think he had 20, but, like, he is not exactly lit it up. He still needs a lot of development as a passer in a new system where the receivers aren't great. I'm a little bit skeptical on Notre Dame.
Yeah, when I saw them 7th in the coaches poll, we thought the same way. I go, this is because of the schedule.
Right. It absolutely
it used to drive me crazy when we did some of the college football preview stuff, because, like, I get it, but I go, wait, do you think they're good, or their schedule isn't that good? And I don't know that in the preseason rankings you should be doing it based on projecting that stuff out. But I also wonder if the coaches, which again, the coaches poll has historically been a joke. If there are times, like, why would Utah be 6 spots behind Notre Dame?
With Cam Rising coming back.
Yeah.
Who's they're the favorites. He's a winner and beat USC twice. Like, I get he's coming off injury, but I totally agree with you. But you know what they do is they probably go back and, like, 8-5 last year. I don't even know. Like, they just start to plug them in. You know how it is.
They definitely just start plugging them in, and you run out. And then sometimes I think you'd want to balance it, because that can happen. It's like, oh, I got too many Big Ten teams, or I have too many SEC teams. It's like, well, guess what? You're going to be doing that every single week, because as it sits right now in the coaches poll, Notre Dame is the only team in the top 9 that's not from the SEC or the Big Ten, and then your Florida State Seminoles. Do you want to do Florida State in the ACC here, or do you want to stay on Utah in the Big 12?
No, I mean, you can just keep burying the ACC. I mean, it's what most people do. Just, like, keep them as an afterthought. We can go wherever you want.
We'll do the ACC now. Clemson and Florida State have won the SEC every year but one since 2011. You've got a new quarterback at the helm, but he's an old quarterback. He's a good friend. He's a good friend of the conference. He's a good friend of Miles.
Do you know him? I thought maybe you knew him. The way you introed him. All right, so here's the deal about DJ. I wanted Cam Ward. That would have been, and I think Florida State wanted Cam Ward as well as a lot of teams did. Miami won the bidding war for him. I'm very bullish on Miami. But for Florida State, I think the one thing that DJU brought to Florida State was like a floor. Like the rails aren't going to fall off. You're not going to have a quarterback like you saw last year when Jordan Travis got hurt and Brock Glenn had to step in, very green, and all of a sudden it was like, we can't even operate an offense. Like, it was bad.
That was brutal. And I don't even mean that to knock your guy, but it
Right.
was
painful to watch. I
just
was
wasn't
like,
gonna
get him out.
Right.
It was one of those situations where, like, what do you want him to do? There's nobody else to turn to. So I think it protects against that. Maybe he plays better because he's got more time. But DJU comes in, and I think the floor is like 8-4 worst case, probably more 9-3, because I do trust that Norvell has been once again doing really well in the portal. And I hate to revolve so much around the quarterback because I do think Florida State's secondary could be one of the best in the ACC, if not the country. I do think their defensive front could be really good. Patrick Payton is an absolute beast. Marvin Jones Jr., who came in from Georgia, whose dad played with me, Shade Tree, Marvin Jones, was incredible. I think they could be really good on the defense side of the ball. Here's where I feel pretty good about Florida State and their chances to win the ACC. The defense, I think, can be elite. And the offense, even when you watch Jordan Travis, like, he was more of a game manager, and like his numbers don't just jump off the table at you. They're going to run the football. Roydell Williams, an offensive line that's veteran, that's probably one of the better ones in the ACC. They're going to try to cram it down people's throat. And then DJ is going to ask to be a manager of the game. I don't think he's going to be a playmaker, but here's where I think separates them from the floor versus potentially, winning the ACC, where Jordan Travis was great. And I go back to the LSU game. Remember, the game was like in the balance and Florida State was driving in, and Jordan Travis, the play was broken, and he like went opposite the play, like backed out to his left and rushed in for a touchdown. Like, there was nothing there. Forget if the back went the wrong way, but he had a knack for making plays when they needed to be made. That, to me, is where DJ has to step up. And if he can get that, then Florida State could be right back in the playoff hunt. But if he doesn't, I feel like they're a good team. It's kind of a rebuild year. You kind of find a playmaker the next season for quarterback. But I think a lot of it does hinge on DJ.
Interesting that you said the LSU game was kind of in the balance, because I think I remember you arguing about Florida State's resume, saying they killed LSU last year.
Well, they did. So, and then they leaned on them in the fourth quarter, like in the 4-minute drill. They just railed them and scored 2 touchdowns at will. So there was that. There was that did happen.
Okay. Am I getting Clemson vibes from you or Miami vibes on the ACC?
Man, I'm buying into Miami. This might be the best roster they've had like 15 years. Like, the Damian Martinez kind of flew in. He was a really good running back at Oregon State. They're bringing back, a receiving core, which is really good. Sammy Brown, a transfer receiver, has been really good. So I trust the offense. I think Cam Ward is a baller. Like, I think he is a difference maker. And that's been the position that really has haunted Miami. De'Aaron King was probably the closest thing to him. Remember when he came in from Houston? They were a 10-win team that year. That was with Mark Richt, but they were pretty good. I think the defense is better. Like, across the board, they are really solid. I think from top to bottom, the schedule, they play Florida State at home. The big question is, can Mario kind of get out of the way? Because now the criticism has kind of reached this crescendo where everybody's starting to notice game time decisions. Does he turn Cam Ward into Justin Herbert, and not the Justin Herbert in the NFL, but the Justin Herbert at Oregon, who was okay, wasn't lighting it up. And that's the concern. But I just feel like this was a really good team last year. The Georgia Tech, refusing to kneel at the end of the game, I think cost them 2 losses. I think they're a team that could win the ACC this year.
Give me your Clemson breakdown, okay? Because if you go back to the 2020 season, they lose in the playoff. But again, they were the preseason number 1 team in the country. They come back in 21, preseason number 3, and they end the season ranked 14th at 10-3. 2022, preseason 4, end up finishing 13th, 11-3. And then people stop picking them as much.
Right.
It's just what happens. So they're preseason 9, and they end up 20th in the AP on a 9-4 season. It is very easy just to go, hey, Dabo had his titles. this is the way it works. It's usually the results are early with the coaches because you're so energized, you're so into it. And like, he's the only guy that even came close to feeling like it was a legitimate challenge to Saban. And it wasn't just a challenge. He got him a couple times, right? Like he's hanging with him as Saban's going through the greatest run the sport has ever seen. What is your opinion on why this Clemson thing has now, it feels a bit like their preseason 20 this year. It kind of feels like year 4 of what happened to this group.
What happened is I think Dabo's stubbornness is causing them, it's keeping them from regaining their dominance in the ACC and potentially even college football. He just will not even look at the transfer portal. Now, I know he said, and he's got his excuses, he said, hey, no one wants, we've got, no one's better than our guys. And I appreciate the mentality, right? He is trying to build up his team and the loyalty of the players that get recruited by Clemson and stick around at Clemson and finish their careers at Clemson, which I appreciate. That is an antiquated view. What Dabo is trying to do essentially is an NFL team winning through the draft and refusing to look at free agency. Like, you can't tell me that Cade Klubnik would have benefited from a Keon Coleman last year, who ended up at Florida State, was really good for them, and was one of the better receivers in the country. But Dabo's like, nope, we don't need them. We don't need anybody. We've got our guys. And he's right that their talent is really, it's elite. Like, he's got really good recruiting classes. He still stacks those up. But where I think it comes to haunt them are two things. One, at select positions where maybe you missed on, a 5-star and he doesn't live up to the potential. So then you have a weakness in your roster. And I thought receiver has been one. They're hoping Bryant Wesco is the guy that steps up, and maybe he does. But it's there, but it's also depth. And with the season expanding, with getting to the playoffs and having more games, you're going to get attrition where all of a sudden you could be going from a transfer guy who's a 5th-year grad transfer with experience, potentially stepping in if somebody gets hurt. Or if he gets hurt, you still have a guy that's younger, but maybe doesn't have to play as much. I just think there's so many different reasons why Dabo should be doing it. And the fact that he's not, is that it's keeping Clemson from achieving their full potential. Because this is a fan base that is invested as anybody. They would throw money at the NIL. They could compete with anybody. And Dabo's like, no. And he doesn't have to become Dion and go get 45 transfers a year. But look at Ohio State. They had one of the smaller transfer portal classes because they recruit really well too. But they go out and get Caleb Downs, to add to a secondary, which has been dicey. They get Quinshon Judkins. They didn't need him, but man, that backfield looks incredible now. They bring in the center from Bama to help the offensive line. They got a select group of guys that help them fill voids. That's what Clemson's not doing. I think it's hurting him.
Yeah, and Ohio State should be able to just call anyone and go, would you want to play here? If it didn't go great your first year, and then it's done. The place recruits itself, especially you would imagine too with the top guys of, say, a Georgia or Ohio State or anything like that, where there's probably some existing relationship from all the work that you put in when the guy was in high school on top of everything else. So why not try to recoup some of those resources, just a time resource of, okay, who did you lose out on? Who do you have a relationship with? Well, think how different it is now. And think how many times just younger people in general, and I don't even mean to make it an age thing, but you're kind of immune. Actually, immune's not the right word, but look, when you're younger, you think a lot of things are supposed to work out. You're kind of shocked when things don't work out for you. And then the realization of like, yeah, this is kind of the way things work. So knowing that this is the group that you're talking to here, and how many young men would be thinking, oh, I don't want to do this. Like, not everything is going my way. Like, let me out of here. This is the whole reason why they used to have the year that you had to sit out, because they didn't want young guys just going, I'm going to change my mind the entire time. Now, granted, they wanted that rule in there because they didn't want to make their own jobs harder, but it was so unfair time and time again that I like that they have that freedom. I just can't imagine spending time recruiting somebody in high school, losing out on them, and knowing that you maybe have an advantage in the transfer portal and then not wanting to do it. So there you go. And look, Cade Klubnik has to be, like, God, I thought he was going to be awesome.
Me too.
And
with
it hasn't
Garrett
happened
Riley.
yet. Yeah.
Because I thought Garrett Riley was a great hire. I think he has to take a big step forward. Physically, he's a little on the small side. He did a couple funky things last year too. Remember at Miami, he called his own number, I was shocked to see that. Last thing on the
Fearless,
transfer,
love it.
yeah, I was surprised he didn't get benched, to be honest with you. Last thing on the portal, I think Dabo looks at the portal the way I did 10 years ago, where you looked at him as not great teammates, quitters, and I felt that way 10 years ago. I don't want guys in the transfer portal. Like, it has changed, though. The mindset of the players, it is basically you have to approach it that it doesn't say anything about the player's mentality. It says that they are taking advantage of a system to potentially get as much, earning capacity as they can. And I think that rubs a lot of coaches the wrong way. But Dabo is like drawing this line in the stand saying, nope, I want a guy who's been mine since day one, and I am not going to listen to anybody else. I think he changes eventually, but I think it could, be a little bit painful in the process.
Okay, let's do a little Big 12 because I, like you, love the combo of quarterback and wide receiver at Arizona. They were two of my favorite players in all of college football last year. It was just so much fun realizing it like in real time if you were up late watching those Arizona games going, this is awesome with these guys. And they stay there, which, I'm sure Jed Fish wishes the time that he had spent getting them into Arizona. Is there enough here, though, in a Big 12 where it feels like if Utah's healthy, it's their conference?
Totally agree. This is probably one of the conferences where I feel most certain about my pick. Kansas State is a trendy pick as well. Like if you were going to go non-Utah, they're betting on a young guy who we don't know much about, Avery Johnson. We mentioned him earlier because he's the pick over Will Howard. But Utah, I think they're one of the Pac-12 was a better conference than the Big 12, top to bottom. Now they didn't have an Oklahoma and Texas. They didn't have really that standard bearer, but the depth of the conference was there. And Utah was perennially one of the best teams in the Pac-12. I think that helps them tremendously coming into the Big 12. They get back Cam Rising. I still think Kyle Whittingham is one of the more underappreciated coaches. I think he's finally starting to show up on top 10 coaches lists finally. But yeah, I feel really good about them. They also get the tight end back. Is it Brant Keithy? I think is his name.
Yeah.
Who comes back from injury as well. And he's a really dynamic weapon. The defense I kind of just trust. So yeah, I like Utah probably better than anybody. And I do think I think the interesting thing, and this is what Brett Yormark, the commissioner, sold everybody on, is that there's, all these teams are really evenly matched, which is true. There's going to be a lot of really tight games in the conference. I just don't think there's any really, really good teams except for Utah, who I trust is a really good team. I think there's a bunch of okay to good teams, and they're going to bang each other up all season long. And, the winner of the conference might be 10-2. I think you'll have a lot of 8-4 teams and 7-5 teams throughout.
That's what I've liked about the Big 12 in past years. And it's just, I've already done it, so I'm not going to get into how disappointing it is. Just little reminders. You're like, it's just never going to be the same without Texas and Oklahoma. But the depth of competitive teams, and that's what I've loved about the Big 12 in certain years. You go, okay, but there's not like half the league that stinks. And yet they'd all kind of get in each other's way. And I don't know that it was underrated, or I don't know. I don't want to get into whether or not the Big 12 has been rated properly historically here. But when you go through all of these teams, you're like, man, you're right. Like it could be a 2-loss conference champion just because there's not as many breaks there. But again, where are the breaks in the SEC? Where are the breaks? Like you have to go through every team's schedule to kind of find like maybe that's part of the Ole Miss math is you're looking at it going, well, it's not as devastating in the possible outcomes. Like when we started this whole thing with Georgia, like that's brutal. That's brutal when you look at who Georgia's going to have to play based on preseason rankings and the fact that they're all going to be on the road. Okay, I think a good way to finish up here will be whether or not you're taking the over or under for Colorado wins right now.
Man, why are you baiting me? I talked to Joel Klatt. I saw him in Indianapolis, Big Ten Media Days.
Are you guys cool?
Yeah, when we're in person, we're cool. Online,
well, you both hate the SEC.
Hate each other.
So, oh, really? But guys, that's crazy that you guys hadn't found some sort of alignment based on your SEC hatred.
You would think
But the
so.
Colorado thing veered you off into a different
it did.
vein of resources.
Yeah, I think Colorado's. Here's the thing about Colorado.
It's
I can't
4.5,
trust them.
right? It's
What's
4.5.
that?
Is it 4.5? The win
I
total
thought it was up to
Colorado?
5.5. It's 4.5. I'd go over, but I think it got up to 5.5. So I'll go under because I think 5 and 7 is probably where I would peg them to be. It is a step in the right direction for them. I do think they have a better roster this season. Like the transfer, like they both seasons they've hit the portal hard.
It is 5.5 now. It is 5.5.
So I would go under on that one. I think Shador is incredible, but man, when he was doing really well, like they decided to make a move at coordinator, which made no sense. And they bring in Pat Shurmur kind of because it's an NFL mind. I'm a little bit concerned there could be a step back offensively in the production. But here's where I could buy in. Travis Hunter, they lost him for that midsection. That's when kind of things started to come off the rails when they lost Travis Hunter for that 3 or 4 game stretch. This team is all about vibes. Like I look at week 2 because I swear, like it is about the vibes. Week 2, by the way, Dylan Raiola, I love that dude. By the way, he looks exactly like Patrick Mahomes. It's crazy. He's trained with him. The spring game, I thought it was him. He wears 15. I think he's going to be really good for Nebraska this season. But like that game, if they lose that game, then they go to Colorado State. Like, how do you feel about that game? A game that was a shootout last year, was in Denver. I think it might have been in Boulder. I think it was in Boulder. They used to play it at Invesco. But like, are we sure they're going to win that game? Or are they still kind of like, this is a program because of all the new players, there's not much chemistry and there's not much loyalty and there's not much a camaraderie that you build up over time with classes, even 2 and 3 years together. And that's what we saw last year. The minute they faced adversity, it imploded. Like the season fell apart on them. So like if it starts great, if they start 3-0 or 4-0, which they probably should, then yeah, buy all the stock you can. But for me, I don't trust it yet. I mean, everything out of there feels like drama, and some of it's intentional drama because they like, being filmed. But I'm not buying the hype just yet until I see it consistently over time. I think there's way too much uncertainty surrounding the team.
Here's what happened, and here's what you also couldn't do while it was happening. TCU was not a good football team, but since they played in the national championship, you had people going, Deion and Colorado beat the national championship runner-up, and it was the most irrelevant stuff ever because the roster wasn't even close to being the same. But it puts it on the map because TCU comes in at 17 in the preseason rankings. They beat Nebraska, who won 5 games last year. Like, let me know when I'm supposed to pay more attention to Nebraska. I'll be here, but just let me know. The Colorado State win. No, I'm just meaning in general. Like Nebraska,
yes, I know.
It's just, I'm so fucking sick of hearing about Nebraska, and there's just not really a lot that has got me excited. Maybe it'll be this year. Maybe it'll be the new quarterback, as you mentioned. The Colorado State win, they probably shouldn't have won that game. I know that you can do that with any kind of close outcome for a million different reasons. They win in double overtime, so they start 3-0, and now it's off the rails. And then they lose every game remaining this season except a 3-point game at Arizona State. So the TCU Colorado State thing like really messed everybody up. And I remember looking at the transfer portal rankings and thinking, okay, maybe they are going to be good because this doesn't make any sense when you blow out that many guys. The roster wasn't good in the first place. So getting rid of guys that were there before Deion got there, what are you really getting rid of? But then the aggregate score of their transfer portal class was higher than everybody else's, I think. So then I thought, okay, maybe, or is it just so skewed with Shador and Travis Hunter that, I don't know, I fell for it all again. What seemed to be the constant theme of last year is that you weren't allowed to ask any of the tough questions after they started 3-0. And then it became a circus of coverage. I know you got caught into it. I know his son got into it with you and a million different things. But I don't know. It now becomes a kind of like victory lap group versus victory. Like everybody's across the street from each other in the parking lot and they're waiting. And I know what side you're on. And
I'm not. That was so like I don't have any animosity towards Deion or Shador. His junior, the one who doesn't play, I do have a little bit towards him. He's the one that called me a hoe. So I don't love him. But like,
yeah, but it wasn't the other thing that there was a clip that was running around. Deion picked you off, and they say it ended your career, and like the timeline didn't even come close to matching up, right?
Yeah. Well, and also as if that was the interception that ended my career. It might have been one of the other 30, like that took place. Like that was what I was like, because that was so frustrating. Because I think Reddit, I don't know who runs the Reddit college football page, but they're not a Danny Kanell fan. But they like put that out there and it goes viral. And I was benched. It was sometime after that. It wasn't the game that I was benched, but that was the least of my problems, was a pick six to Deion, which was kind of comical. There was also the clip of Deion when he said he kind of distanced himself from Florida State. And that's when Deion came back at me, he's like, you don't know what you're talking about. Because remember the reporter said, you're a Seminole, but now you're at Colorado. And he stopped her and was like, no, what'd you say? I'm not, I didn't graduate from there. And that all goes back to him wanting the Florida State job and then telling him you have to have your degree. That's why a lot of that was playing out. But he was really distanced himself from Florida State, which he went back on when he was on Big Noon. He said, hey, I owe so much to Bobby Bowden and Mickey Andrews. So he kind of made good on that one.
Okay, real quick. I know you got to go. And we went pretty long here. Let's do it. It's a surprise. Let's draft 8 playoff teams each. Okay? So we'll see how we can do. We're going to give us 16 chances to hit all 12, which we're not going to do. And I'm afraid this is going to be a little chalky, but I'll let you go first. So go for it.
I'll go Georgia.
Snake draft? I'm just kidding. I'll go Ohio State.
I'll go Oregon.
Very chalky.
Have you met Lanning yet?
Yeah, love Lanning.
He's awesome.
Yeah, he came on. He spent like an hour with me, man. I was thrilled. God, we're staying shocked. I'll stay Texas.
So this is how many teams make the playoff?
Yeah.
I'll go Penn State.
Smart and equitable selection there. Give me Bama then.
I'll go Missouri.
You just head-to-head like Missouri better than Ole Miss today, right?
I think they're very similar teams. And I think Missouri's completely flying under the radar. And by the way, their schedule is way easier than Ole Miss's, even though Ole Miss is pretty easy.
I want to start getting a little creative, but I think I'll wait one more round. So give me Michigan.
I'll go Florida State.
Even though you picked Miami?
I didn't pick them. I said I was bullish on them.
Okay. I'll stop getting cute. Give me Utah.
Oh, it's a great one. I'll go Notre Dame. The brand's going to help them. They're going to be 10-2 and get in.
The schedule, I mean, when you start looking at this conference expansion and then look at Notre Dame's schedule, where Notre Dame used to be the standard of like, look at all these teams they have to play. And now you look at it and go, maybe they will. And I think that's what's happening with the preseason ranking here as well. I'll take Ole Miss.
How many are we at?
5 each, 3 more.
I'll go Miami.
Okay. I'm going to be cute here and give me Tennessee.
It's a good one. I like that. Nico.
Like that one?
Get the Nico show ready to go. I'll go Kansas State.
Damn. Thought I had it. Give me. This means.
Hold on. Neither one of us. There is going to be a group of 5 team in. So I just gave you a layup. Like if you want to take your favorite group of 5 team, Liberty is 100% going to run the table. Like that is the lock of the century. But they don't play a Power 5 team, which Memphis does.
I think you should be left out. I think you should still be left out.
I do. I think they might because of what happened against Oregon too. That might hurt them.
They should give them the bid and then say, but since you didn't play anyone and you're probably going to make up national championship T-shirts that Danny's going to order. I almost don't want to take. Give me App State then.
There you go. Sean Clark squad. They play Liberty. I think they play each other in Boone. It's a good pick.
Okay. Last thing before we let you go. Do you want to guess how many active coaches in college football have a national championship?
I think I saw this number. Dabo's one. Who else am I missing?
Mac Brown.
Mac Brown from Texas.
Now you're just going to be mad you can't get another one.
Yeah, now I'm just driving me nuts.
Kirby, Georgia.
Oh, duh. Yeah. And that's it, right?
That's it.
That's it. It's crazy. That is an unbelievable stat. Kirby was the most obvious. Missed him.
The most obvious one is the easiest one to miss, right?
Yeah.
So it's 3 now with Saban leaving because he owned a decade's worth, essentially. And then Jimbo's gone. Coach O's gone. Urban's gone. Harbaugh's gone after getting last year's. So that's...
And yet there will be coaches who get fired because like James Franklin, if they don't win one, he's going to be on the hot seat. Like, it shows you how hard it is, too.
Sounds like you're a huge James Franklin guy. I like that for you.
I am not. I do like him. I am a huge fan.
I know
this
you
is more.
do.
I should have given you another name. Dang it! I should have said
That's all right.
Kalen DeBoer. If he doesn't win it, he's going to get fired.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it as always, and we'll check in during the season. All right.
All right, you got it.
You want details? Fine. I drive a Ferrari 355 Cabriolet. What's up? I have a ridiculous house in the South Fork. I have every toy you can possibly imagine. And best of all, kids, I am liquid. So, now you know what's possible. Let me tell you what's required.
The email address, lifeadvicerr@gmail.com. What is up to everybody? Shout out Kyle. Not sure why, though. All right. 6'5", 190, slim frame, so not lifting super heavy here, but make up for it with good looks. Will attach picture to confirm. Well, awesome. Player comp, Bruno Caboclo, pre-draft with a little bit of Doncic attitude. You might have it.
Not important.
I think it was Caboclo draft night.
One of those ones. Yeah.
Yeah, because I still have that in my head from the prep.
Like Tyrod and Tyrod.
Doncic.
Gadzurich. So all in, the worst type of guy to run into at the Y. Oh, so physical and attitude. I've been struggling with a small issue that has arisen since meeting my girlfriend. Nothing bedroom related. I'm a stallion there. This guy's fucking awesome.
All right. What's going on?
Yeah. She comes from he didn't attach a pic. Sure. That's too bad.
New age Russillo.
She comes from a family which has a lot of money. She's used to a certain lifestyle. This is a rather common issue for lots of people, I'm sure. But the problem is I don't have any money. I actually you're just there for the sex and good looks, dude. I actually make a decent enough salary within the banking sector. I'm writing for my work email, so don't mention the company in the pod. Okay, no problem. We've done a few of these before, dude. The issue is she makes a lot of money herself, also a banker, and she doesn't really have to make adjustments to her lifestyle. We are currently doing a somewhat long-distance relationship until she moves to my city and we can start living together. But for now, I'm flying about an hour to go see her almost weekly. Flying to her city and visiting her is an absolute treat. I love doing it, but it comes at a cost. Every month, I'm spending all the money I prefer to put aside. I'm basically just traveling to visit her, and then we haven't gotten to the let's go out and eat tonight, let's do something nice tomorrow aspect of the relationship. The combined with the ski holiday with her family, where obviously I pay for myself, summer vacations to Italy, and so on and so forth. I'm basically going paycheck to paycheck and don't really get the feeling that she understands that I want to have a bit of a buffer. This guy's like in an Instagram relationship.
Yeah, jeez.
But, well, at least everybody thinks you're killing it, dude.
Yeah.
Take all the pictures and all the opportunities you have to show off your lifestyle. I guess what I'm asking is, what do I do here? She does come visiting me, but her employer doesn't allow it for as much as mine, which is completely fair. But I do wish that she could understand we don't have the same means to an end. I don't really know how to bring it up without sounding stingy or whiny either, since I've mentioned in the past briefly, but it all kind of got pushed aside. We've been together for almost 2 more years now, and I'm certainly marrying her. But goddamn, I don't see how I'm going to be able to afford a wedding ring, down payment for a house together when I can't put any money aside. Sorry for the long sob story, which probably sounds like a non-issue. Would love to get your thoughts on my situation. Love the pod, and tell Bill to go easy on LeBron. The guy's been carrying the league for 20 years. Respect greatness. You know what I think he should respect is the rules of free throw contest. Did you see LeBron shoot the free throw with his right hand? And the contest was you had to take the free throws with your offhand, and then everybody else shot it like left-handed that were right-handed. And he said because he writes left-handed, he shot and made the free throws and then won the contest. How is this not a bigger deal? Why is mainstream media not covering this story? And then he crowned himself again after he won the free throw contest, and then crowned himself when he came back in the arena at yesterday's game when the entire arena was cheering the French swimmer. And he thought they were cheering him. And I don't know what else he workshopped prior to the crown. Like, did he stick his finger in his armpit and smell it and be like, no, that's number 2. I'll do the crown as my celebration. I'm just telling you, those moments sucked. So we'll respect none of it.
That's a tough one. They always tell you right with what hand do you write with when they say, what are you? But I bat lefty and shoot a gun lefty, but everything else is right hand. So
yeah, but if you were with your friends and you was like, hey, let's do a free throw contest and you're going to shoot with your offhand. And he's like, no, actually, I shoot right-handed. And then he wins. That's fucking weird is my point. And it doesn't mean I don't appreciate how spectacular he has been for 20 years. But that's fucking weird.
We're all witnesses.
Yeah. I didn't have a window. I was gone. Exhale. Okay. Look, man, I think the good thing here is that you're going to marry her. So I think you should be able to go, I'm going to start mailing in some of these trips here. Mailing in is not the best term for this. I like
probably
that term.
No.
Not a great fit here. But maybe what I'm leaning towards is the mailing in the time investment that you're making on this. Like if it's already locked up, like if it's the girl of your dreams and you're in a tenuous situation and you're like, I have to invest all of this time and in this case, money to make sure she realizes how much I care and reciprocate everything. Well, it doesn't sound like it's being reciprocated because she's not going to back to you. Like you've already pretty much got it locked up. So I think you can get away with cutting out half of these trips.
Yeah.
If you're doing this weekly, that's fucking crazy, dude.
Yeah. Unless you're like, if I'm not there, what's she going to do on Friday instead? Like that might be something you have to figure out internally. But I mean, if you're not going to go the lying route, which I don't think you should, which would have been like, hey, listen, I was just a lot of margin calls. I don't know if you've been watching the stocks lately, but I just got to figure this out. And I don't think you should start out with a lie, but I think you could definitely say, listen, I'm not going to miss any of the big ones. And, I was thinking maybe we just cut it down monthly. You just level with her, right? Because you're saying you're looking down the road at a long future. You should be able to talk about this stuff. But maybe you could also
Easter in, Ash Wednesday out.
Right. I will definitely be in Aspen, and I'm starting to scratch together something for this Italy trip you're talking about, 2025. But maybe you could like leverage some of your airplane costs into some 1-800-Flowers. You know what I mean? Like the lesser of two evils. It's like I'm not there this weekend, but that's a big bouquet that's coming your way. Like maybe you could do that. Gold belly, something nice to show you care, but just knocks down your outgoing costs.
Here's the other thing I'd ask. Is she loaded? Because then you can just spend all of your money and it doesn't matter because you're marrying somebody really rich. If you think that way.
I was gonna say, it's still a roll of the dice there. You're not quite locked in yet.
That's also
yeah, like you're not quite locked in. You're right.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think he's like looking at this like, hey, I want to go. I'm gonna be on scholarship once we get married. Like, we'll be good.
Well,
am I taking crazy pills?
Who says I shouldn't?
What?
But am I taking crazy? Like, just talk to her. If you're that close and you're like on the path to marriage, just be like, hey, I'd like to be able to invest and afford a down payment on our future house and your future engagement ring. What's she going to be mad about that? I don't. And if she is, then that's a huge red flag. So I just like, I know I get docked for like, hey, Ceruti just says the obvious thing. I'll just talk to her. I don't understand why you wouldn't just be like, this is the situation. It's not sustainable. Can we figure out a different solution? It's not because I don't love you or don't want to see you as often, but we have bigger goals in life. So let's figure out those now as we start to like progress to this point in our relationship where it's kind of, heading towards the engagement marriage section. I just don't think that's insane. And then you're going to get your answer if she has a reaction to that.
Yeah, this is classic Ceruti advice, and it's the right advice. This is vintage Steve Ceruti advice, and it's correct. I don't know if you have to say like what I want to spend the money on instead, but I think the core of it is just honesty. Be like, listen, I'm a little low. This current lifestyle is making it so that I'm paycheck to paycheck. I just want a little buffer, and I think we're just knock it down for once a month for now. Like, I'm secure about that. Instead of being like, I have to do it to pay for this and that, and like, don't overload it.
But it's all about her.
The core is on.
It's it's not like, hey, I want to go, take a golf trip with my buddies, like we were just talking about in a previous email. Like it's stuff for you guys and your future. You're not even being selfish here. You're being smart. She should appreciate that.
But I would share that there can be people that are really rich that are just so oblivious to stuff. And they're like, what do you mean you can't go to Positano this weekend? And you're just like, I can't.
Do you even care about me, dude?
Yeah, right. Or maybe you're supposed to continue to present that you're not worried about any of this. I mean, I imagine in 2 years, she has a pretty good understanding of your cash situation, right? And so are you the prospective husband here? No. Has he been so willing to spend that she thinks he's positioned better financially?
Maybe, yeah. That's a bummer.
And they're working in the same industry. I mean, who knows? I mean, if the guy has his stuff together, then he's probably going to end up being successful anyway at some point. But yeah, sometimes I think rich people can understand, but then can be incredibly oblivious at the same time. And especially if it's your family's money and not your money. And again, it's like everything else. It doesn't mean every kid that grows up really, really wealthy is oblivious to what other people are capable of. But there's certainly examples, and I've seen it plenty of times where you'll just go oh, we're all doing this thing. And when I'd be younger, I'd be like, how are you even pulling that off? Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
It's a little weird too that, usually, I mean, you don't want to speak for everybody, but usually in the situations, I feel like when you're going on a vacation with especially a really rich family, you have to pay for all of that is a little odd, or am I wrong on that? That usually the tab is picked up every once in a while.
Yeah, but I think if you're the guy trying to make a nice impression, you might just come in there already, just to be like,
but a lot of times it's like, hey, I'll pick up the bill if you're, out to dinner with your in-laws. And it's like, all right, dude, come on,
Yeah, look, I think
but we got it.
The fact that he brings it up, that he's like, I've tried to bring it up, just kind of push it up the side. And he's asking specifically, he knows he has to say something. So that's not the revelation. It's how do you handle it? And I think the key thing to do here would be to emphasize that you need to cut down on some of this travel and some of these visits. That's a lot of visits for a 2-year long, long distance relationship. I don't even know how you're staying above water right now.
That's got to feel like the longest year ever. January, and you're like, oh my God.
Yeah. So I would say, hey, this is what I want to do because I'm going to marry you. And I want us to have a decent foundation here financially. That's what you're doing. You're not telling her you don't want to spend money. You're telling her that you want to save money to be able to spend money on her and your future together.
Well, it's been nice being a Delta Diamond member. That does have some drawbacks.
Right. We're not getting upgraded anymore, but here we go. Okay. 23-year-old sister dating a 45-year-old. Yo. 6'2", 215. Well, at least you're huge, dude. Just gym stats have taken a hit since my 2 kids, but can throw up 225 on a bench a handful of times. Everything else hurts these days. Basketball comp, Alex Caruso, white guy, is deceptively quick, solid defender, average mid-range, and losing my hair at a young age. My sister, 23 years old, just told me she's dating a 45-year-old. As a concerned older brother, I was flabbergasted. My first concern was the age gap, obviously, but it gets worse. They work together in the same division, and their boss happens to be my uncle.
Jesus Christ.
Is this a TV show plot? I'm just not sure.
I know. That's an episode, Kyle. He's also divorced with 2 kids who are closer in age to her than she is to him. She says she's never been happier. He treats her well. Says when they're together, I mean, dude, if your girlfriend's 23, you're probably the happiest you've ever been if you're 45. So no wonder he's in a good mood all the time. He treats her well and says when they're together, you don't even notice the age difference. Massive eye roll. She's fully aware of how this comes across and all the difficulties dating a much older man could bring down the road. They've already talked about marriage. And by the way, I know as I say that, you've never been happier. I think for anybody getting north of 45, there's actually a floor that gets raised where you're like, this doesn't even make any sense. I think this is past the floor. I don't know where you guys are on that. You're not as old as I am, but
would agree.
There's a line where you go, what the hell am I going to talk to this person about? Okay. They've already talked about marriage, said I love you, and having kids of their own, and even freezing his sperm.
Great.
It's only been 3 months.
Oh. Oh,
I think freezing sperm 3 months in is a pretty hard right turn. But hey, some people just, when love is in the air, you can't deny its power. She generally has her head on straight, or at least I thought she did. Good job, good degree, grad school. She's ready to tell my parents. I, on the other hand, think it may kill my elderly father. I want to be supportive if she's happy, but there's some major red flags here. Is there any talking any sense into her, or will this likely fizzle out in a couple of months? Yeah, I think you got to let this one fizzle. She's not going to listen to anything you're going to have to say. I mean, you could do the ultimate, like, hey, we need to do this one time, and I'm going to talk to you one time, and I promise I will never bring it up again. But do you understand the math here and the complications of what's going to be going down? And obviously, if I were like a 23-year-old girl and I start doing the math, going like 45, and then he's 67, am I going to be into that? When I'm 55 and he falls in the shower and I'm rolling around the farmer's market, like, am I going to be into that? Might not want to say those things, but if you think it doesn't mean you're the most evil person ever. I would have a hard time with it. I have sisters. I wouldn't love it, but I also know what would happen if they're like, this is who I love. I'm like, okay, my work is done here.
I would maybe spend a little time with this dude before you do anything, because I like, even if your mind's made up, fine. If you're not going to jump to the other side of the aisle on this, that's fine. But I would at least.
What if he's awesome, right?
I mean,
can you ask the uncle? Can't you ask the uncle? Give us a scouting report. What's his deal?
What if? Right. But I would definitely, just even if you are planning on talking to her about it, you should want to have a little bit of credibility in the field of this man. Like, you don't want to just be somebody who's spewing stuff just because you feel like it's wrong. I don't think you're going to have success talking to her about this. Some girls just like older dudes like that. She might have a type, and this is her discovering that. I don't know. And I think there's two types of older divorce guys, like guys who are ready to get back in the marriage line and guys who are never going to do that again. So maybe you could try to sniff out which type of dude that is. But I wouldn't say anything, and I wouldn't like commiserate with your dad and get more fired up about it until you at least maybe go to a function or just do a little scouting on this guy. I wouldn't just off the dome be like, this is wrong because it's wrong. Like, I just wouldn't do that.
There you go.
99% of the time, yeah, this is wrong. But you Kyle 100% crushed that. You need some, the age thing can't be the only thing. Like, you got to meet him. You got to at least try, because otherwise she's just going to think you're being a hater, which, you are in some ways. But even though I agree, you are right. Like, if I have two younger sisters, if this was the situation, I would not be thrilled about it. But there's just not much you could really do in these situations. I think you just got to let it play out as shitty as that's going to be. I mean, the father thing does suck, because I could see my dad also not loving that. And that would bum me out a ton. And I'd probably want to try to do something, but you're only going to kind of make it worse the bigger stink you put up without really even knowing who this guy is. So I think you got to let him come to a couple functions, and hopefully he screws up or something, hopefully like the message gets seen and she can see that it's not just you. Maybe it's your entire family. It's like, this is kind of strange. And then she gets kind of awkward and realizes that she's wrong. Or maybe they're in love. Who knows? And it's great. And they're going to be awesome. And they're going to have a bunch of kids and everyone's going to be happy.
Yeah. Invite him over for Labor Day. See if you can see what's going on there. Everyone. Then you guys can all talk about him after he's gone.
I think the uncle part is key here. But then again, you don't know, like, what are the uncle's priorities? Be like, he's one of the best HVAC guys in the Midwest.
Yeah.
What else do you need from me? And you just go, well, any things about like his personality, be like, he follows up his calls. His numbers are good. His book is good. Yeah. He's meticulous about it. Like, that's not really helping me. The job may be that you're the buffer for the sister and your dad. That might be the role that you have to pivot into here. But yeah, maybe the guy is awesome and it'll actually kind of work out. And I mean, it can happen. It can happen. I don't want to do this because we've since banned any family stuff with Ceruti. So we're not going to make it specific to this, because this is already awkward as we started it. But like, all right, maybe we'll just start with Kyle to kind of appetize our way into it. If you didn't know me, Kyle, and then you had a sister who was, let's, for the sake of my math, like 28, and then I'm on the scene, where are you?
Well, we've kind of done the opposite with my brother and his girlfriend this last year. I mean, that's similar math. So I kind of felt him out, and he was just like, I don't want to fucking talk about this. And I was like, great. Okay. I put my shot up and it didn't go in. That's fine. So
Ceruti, I know this is weird. I've already made it weird.
No,
It's
I mean,
impossible now.
Yeah, if I didn't know you, I'd be like, this sucks and fuck that guy.
What if you only knew me as a podcaster? Like you're like, I really like his podcast, but
I still think I wouldn't be excited about it. I don't know.
You can say you hate it. Because you hate it. You would hate it.
No, I'm not afraid at all to say that. I think I would. There's no way I would be cool with it.
Would you unsubscribe?
I don't know.
to the pod,
Which sucks to say, because even if you have the
reviews?
best intentions, even if the guy has the best intentions and he's awesome, and I don't know, like there's just maybe that makes me
some
ageist
optics you
or
can't
whatever.
fight. Some optics you just can't fight.
Yeah, look, it can happen, but I think our reactions and the reaction to this email are fairly normal. So good luck. Thanks to Oregon. Thanks to Ceruti. Thanks to Kyle. Ryen Russillo podcast on YouTube as well. Please subscribe to Ringer Spotify.